welcome to the Life Burst Podcast, where we're going to review Curiosity Diva. We're going to be talking with the Lrigs first. You guys can all find this on their global Facebook page. I had to sort of rip them out, so the resolution's a little bit lower. But these are our new Lrigs that we're going to be seeing in Curiosity Diva. And the face of the box is Miko 3. I assume you have to say 3 every time because it's got 3 E's. So Miko is the head of the heal team, Kirum. And yeah, they're the head of the heal team in the anime. So I think they went into comedy at the end. Spoilers. Here is Miko. It's a level 3 blue Lrig, center Lrig, that has the auto ability of whenever this Lrig attacks your opponent, if your opponent has 3 or less cards in their hand, draw a card. If they have 4 or more cards in their hand, the opponent discards a card. Cool. Its enter ability is that you get to draw 2 cards unless your opponent discards a card. Its action, once a game ability, is look at your opponent's hand and then choose a card. You can remove that card from the game. Okay, so Miko. Is this card good or is this bad? I think it falls probably short, to be honest with you. Let's break it down into its primary functions, shall we? Whenever you give your opponent the ability, or you have things that are out of your own control in card games, generally speaking, they always end up way worse than you think they will. A lot of the times you look at Punisher effects and you think, I can make a board state where this basically is going to be in my favor constantly. But there's going to be games that you can't, and on those games that you can't, you're going to wish that you had control. That being said, does Miko fall on the side of Punisher effects where you basically have no control over it, or do you actually have control 90% of the time? Those 10% are outliers. That's a good question, and I think it's based on a lot of discard, right? The power that your opponent has over what you can do is if they have a hand. If they do not have a hand, then they have 0 control over it, right? So basically, if you're playing against white decks that draw cards, and there's a lot of those, and you're playing against blue decks that draw cards, and there's a lot of those, and you're playing against black decks that maybe draw some amount of cards from their trash, and there's not a lot of those, there's actually just only a medium amount of those. It's usually mid-range that has white or blue featured in it anyways, so it doesn't really matter in this scenario, and there are green cards don't draw very much, and red doesn't draw very much. So against those types of aggressive decks, you could certainly put the control down in there. But it also, you got to factor in a Xenocluster is a real card, and like everyone's using it now, which is correct, by the way. So whenever this Lrig attacks, if your opponent has 3 or less cards in their hand, you get to draw a card. If they have 4 or more cards in your hand, the opponent has to discard a card. So the more powerful effect here, in my opinion, is the making your opponent discard stuff. But it is attached to the rider of if they have 4 or more cards in their hand. And the thing is, discard is not powerful when they have lots of cards in their hand. Discard's powerful when they have little cards in their hand. So this can be theoretically a counter to, I don't know, a blue deck or something that is redrawing cards, and you're like, well, I just have tons of discard gas, so this will work in that scenario. Against the aggressive decks that are more likely to have less cards in their hand, you get to draw a card is probably good, because you're probably looking for guards, is what that ends up being. The enter ability of draw 2 cards unless your opponent discards a card, is not great, because I think in most case scenarios the opponent is going to discard a card regardless of if they're aggressive or if they're controlling or if they're mid-range or if they're tempo. They're just going to discard a card because it would be better to allow you to have just less, right? Like it's them discarding a card, it means that they're down 1 from the opponent's like tempo, whereas the opponent drawing 2 means that they're down 2, if that makes any sense. There's going to be scenarios, though, where the opponent's going to look at their hands, see that 1 card's going to lead them to victory, and go, yep, go ahead, draw your 2 cards, and it's not going to make any difference. So this Punisher effect is actually specifically bad, in my opinion. And then you look at the once a game ability, look at your opponent's hand, choose a card, and remove that card from game. It doesn't say a non-guard. You can get a guard with it, so I think that's probably its most powerful thing. I think what I want from Miko is a mid-range deck where I'm I'm attacking a lot, right? And this will allow me to pressure my opponent's resources while simultaneously pushing me ahead. And I guess I'm describing tempo here, by the way. And but the reason I would use this, if I was going to use this at all, would be that once a game ability to look at my opponent's hand, strip a guard from their hand, and then attack them for the win if I can do it. And it's not like blue has not had aggressive decks, right? Like the most recent uh, Madoka 2.0 is an aggro or tempo deck. It's not a control deck. So I think I'd lean towards mid-range with this because drawing a card or making your opponent discard a card on attack wants me to attack with my Lrig at least a couple times. And Wixoss, you're really only getting till turn 4. I'd probably pair this with some kind of Lrig like Madoka Clap or MC Line Disrespect to try to get myself to turn 5, maybe turn 6, right? If you pair one of those Lrigs with a lot of draw power, you should be able to get guards, and then that could get you to turn 6. I don't think you're going past turn 6 with this, so you're going to get like about 2, maybe 3 triggers off of this, and I think that's the sweet spot where you're going to be looking for here. It's also worth mentioning, and we'll go into it more deeply when I actually do the videos with these things, that they have a very, very strong team piece that can just shut down team's effects, right? Team's pieces, and that's good. It's definitely a draw into wanting to run them as a team, but I think honestly you're gonna need to pair this with MC Line Disrespect or Madoka Clap in order to justify using this and being in a sort of like an aggressive blue mid range, which is a little difficult because there's not a ton of aggressive blue options. So I think this is viable. I don't think it's optimal. I don't think it's like a staple by any stretch. I think you could use this as sort of the Quagsire. Yeah, I'm using a Pokemon reference here. Of the meta, if you were people like run tons and tons and tons of No Limit and Endless Punchline, right? That you can use this to counter them with their team piece. But outside of that, I think it doesn't do much. And the worst part is against DXM, which I actually would play this against in order to use this team piece. They can just exclude away trigger a victory for bonus and then use Death Deck. So it ends up not working out in practice. And that's kind of what happens in the Japanese meta too, by the way. Let's talk about Nova, Destiny Imperial. As much as I love Nova as a character, this is not my favorite Nova in existence, although I do like the art a lot. It's a level 3 white Lrig. Its core cost is 2. Its auto ability is whenever this Lrig attacks, you may put a card underneath this Lrig into its owner's trash. If you do, you can put target card from your trash to the top of your deck. Enter, look at the top 3 cards of your deck, put up to 1 card on top of your deck, and the rest on the bottom of your deck in any order, and its once a game action ability is put target white Signy from your trash into the top of your deck until the end of this turn. At the end of this turn, you draw 2 cards. Okay, so the reason why I don't love this Nova is its lack of immediacy. Let's just be blatant about how you're going to use this card. This is an upgrade on the original Nova. I shouldn't even compare it to the original Nova because that's unfair, right? This is just a completely different card. This is what you're going to want to do with this is play some amount of spells and some amount of guards, clearly, because Nova can get back guards and spells, which is unusual in Wecross. Normally, you can just get back Signy. So if you're looking for a white-based, spell-based deck where you need to reload your spells, this is a good candidate for that. It's also worth mentioning that it plays really well with blue draw spells, because you can draw the cards, not that you put on top last turn, but actually that doesn't work out at all, because you're going to be drawing them regardless on the following turn. The lack of immediacy is really my main concern with this card. But here's what you're going to be doing 9 times out of 10. You're going to be playing this, entering this, putting a guard on top of your deck. Then you are going to use its once a game ability immediately to put a white Signy, probably Exia, on the top of your deck, and then you're going to draw both of them at the end of turn, which means that you'll have an Exia for next turn, but you'll have the guard for the defense step, right? and then you're going to draw into whatever you set up on your enter ability. So the only way that I can really see to get over this immediacy, again, if it said whenever this Lrig attacks, you may put a card from your trash to your hand, this card would be undeniably amazing. Like, you would just be getting guards back without any tons of work, and it would be really, really good for you. As it stands, you're going to try to probably play a more defensive-esque mid-range deck, where you're being proactive with your strategy. And I know those two words don't really make much sense together, which is, again, my issue with this Nova. You're going to want to say, okay, Exia is a great example of a defensive card that is proactive, in the fact that you don't need to do anything for its defensiveness. You just put it out. And so you'll want to do that. And what you'll want to loop is probably 2 guards, right? You'll want to have 1 guard in your hand that's going to be discarded on your opponent's defense step, and 1 guard on the top of your trash. The best way to do that is to probably put black in your deck, run some amount of mills so you can hit your mills early, and then you'll probably want to run something like Akino in order to get a guard back to your hand, so you can get yourself in a loop scenario. Or you'll want to run Super Celestia Saber, and that'll let you also get the guard back to your hand. Both of these, I think, are super valid strategies with this. There's also a little trick that you can do, and this one goes out to shout out to my locals, where you can play rapid accumulation. And if you play rapid accumulation, you can get, as soon as the attack happens, you can stack your triggers, so that way you put the guard on top of your deck, and then you draw that guard immediately. So I probably would play some amount of rapid accumulation. I think maybe the number is 3 in this deck. And that's where you're going to want to be. This deck excels, right? Like, this Nova excels at setting your next turn up. That is its main functionality. It does not give you card advantage, and it does not give you defensiveness. So any way that you can proactively set yourself up for winning the game on the next turn, that's how you're going to run Nova. Which means that you could also run a more aggressive strategy, where you're getting your removal back constantly. The issue, there's not a ton of great removal in white yet. There will be, don't worry, but we're not there yet. So for right now, I'm going to put this down as barely viable. I'll upgrade it to viable once the bounce white spell gets printed in, I think, 2 or 3 sets. Let's talk about Hirana, A Step Towards the Glimmer. Okay, so Hirana, A Step Towards the Glimmer. This is a level 3 red Lrig with the grow cost of 2 red, and it's got a constant. During your turn, the Signy in your center zone get plus 3,000 power. That does actually kind of matter sometimes. You get to draw, its enter abilities, draw a card and enter charge 1, a staple of no limit, and also a pretty good enter effect. And then its once a game action ability is draw 2 cards, enter charge 2. At the end of this turn, put all cards in your hands into the enter zone, into the trash. Okay, so it's a big splashy once a game effect that does not affect the board in the slightest. Although arguably it affects the board because it gives you enter, and it gives you 2 cards that you can then play to affect the board. Where does this shine? And the answer is, when you look at the macro lens of everything, so yeah, the macro, right? See it all. You see red cards, and you see Exia it's competing against, and you see actually Hirana 1.0 that it's competing against. It's probably competing against DJ Lovett as well, right? Exia gives things Assassin, which is awesome for red aggro decks specifically. The other Hirana gives you damage. It gives you a little bit less push, which is great in aggro, but it's also good in mid-range, as we've been seeing in the American meta. It turns out you can run Hirana Dream Teams perfectly fine, slow them down a little bit in order to be a little bit more meta relevant, and you'll be able to run them. Stuff with the Madoka Clap or MC Lion Disrespect. And it works. So, consider that. It's pretty good there. The DJ Lovett excels in enter burn strategies. It just has a ton of enter burn that it can run. Plus, it has actually got the ability to go into a combo deck of being Endless Punchline. So all of those are sort of like areas owned already by previous Lrigs, which this Lrig does nothing to make it happen, right? As we're gonna see with Towel, the old Towel and the new Towel coming up, I actually, if there was ever a red combo deck, I might run those two Lrigs. So this is hard pressed to find a home, but it doesn't mean that you can't find a home for it. And if we were to try to maximize what this offers that none of the other ones offer, it's immediacy, which is ironically what Nova was lacking. But it only offers immediacy. That's it. That's all it offers. So the fact that you can play this and immediately have zero cards in hand, which you should at least have two. You should have 2 cards in hand, go up to 5 cards in hand, right? You draw a card and you enter charge, and then you draw 2 cards and you enter charge twice. And then so you start a turn with 0 cards in hand and like start your main phase with 5 cards and 3 entered. That might be the difference between winning a game and losing a game when you're doing an aggro push. It's also worth mentioning that 3,000 is just enough to be relevant in red team pump strategies. A lot of the times, red team pump is looking for either a 4,000 or a 3,000 or a combo of both. If you want to know the card I'm talking about here, Tengu is a good example, where 3,000 is enough to give it Assassin in some cases. So it has a niche there as well that you can use that along with Buffalo, things like that, and you might end up seeing a red team punk package, which is starting to potentially be an option, right? We need Assassin, maybe we need some kind of removal. There's a lot of black-based assist machinas going around where the plus 3,000 for free is actually very good because it'll allow you to get your double crush on or whatever you need to get damage pushed in a certain area. So it has a home. My home that I would put this in is hyper aggro. I would put this in a literally balls against the walls, go aggro type of deck where I'm trying to win as fast as possible, and I'm looking to probably burn that action ability, that once a game ability turn 4, to just get enough to finish up and win the game. This actually pairs nicely with, for example, the go to the top with the enter burn strat there, because sometimes you just don't have enough enter to do removal and also go to the top on turn 4. So this is what I would probably... You probably do it turn 3, by the way, too. So I might consider something like this for that. Next, we're talking about VJ Wolf 3rd versus Alts. It's a level 3 green Lrig. It's got the enter ability of enter charge 1 for each level of each assist on your Lrig on the field. So it can enter charge anywhere from 0 to 4, depending on how high of your levels are. If you got a 2/2, that's 4. Your action ability is green, colorless, vanish target signing on your opponent's field with power 10,000 or more. Its action ability is, once a game, cards in your enter zone gain multi-enter this turn. Okay, so where do we like this in our green Lrigs? Well, I actually think this is pretty playable as a center. The green is good at enter charging, right? Like that's like all of its like life burst abilities has enter charge stapled on it, and Ott doesn't give you a positive amount of enter with its ability, right? It just pays for itself. This gives you a positive amount. This gives you 4, so you can pay for it and you have a benefit of 2. And in the Ott deck, we're still able to hit 7 pretty often, right? And pay for 2 of removal, like pretty much each turn, 2 or 4 for each removal. So there's something that this card offers that no other green Lrig currently offers, and that's repeat removal. It's expensive. 3 is expensive, and attached to the rider that you have to vanish something power 10,000 or more is a bit of an issue. Generally speaking, turn 3 onwards, if your opponents are trying to counter your VJ Wolf by putting out tiny things, then you have a pretty good counter in the fact that green also gets access to Lancer, and you can just run over it instead. Um, and if they're also probably less pressuring you then because the opponent's not playing level 3s really. Um, so I think there's no way around it. The opponent's gonna basically have to fall into having one open lane a turn and letting you burn 3 enter each turn to do it. Um, I think that's where you're gonna lean VJ Wolf into a mid-range deck, right? You're gonna be like one of these decks where you're like, I'd like to go turn, I don't know, 6, right? So you're gonna probably want to pair it with some amount of blue so that you can draw cards and get yourself some guards back. Or white will let you do that as well. And then you're gonna probably want to run something like Madoka Clapper, MC Lion, Disrespect. You probably want to run MC Lion, Disrespect. Looking at this, and then you get the ability to be able to run Haniels or things to get yourself guards in order to sort of cheat on the fact that you're not drawing cards a ton. The cool thing is it's also got this once a game ability multi-enter, right? Now we don't have a lot of splash cards yet. Now it is worth mentioning that there is a bunch of spells in Wixoss and a bunch of Signy in Wixoss that are green and have costs on them that are not green, right? That are black or something else. And you can play those in your deck because you're not breaking any rules, right? This isn't Commander from Magic the Gathering. You are playing a green card and it has a black cost. You might not be playing a black Lrig, and then you can use your once a game ability to give all your enter zone multi-enter, and then boom, you can then play those cards. Now, there's no card right now that I'm like, ooh yeah, gotta do it. There's like even a rainbow card that exists that you can play with this. But it's not like, whew, I did it, man. I won the game because I played a rainbow card. But if they push 5 colors in this format at all, at any point, VJ Wolf becomes more attractive, right? Because then you can like be the only deck that is able to play those types of cards in the Diva format. So I'd keep it on a watch list. It's viable right now. I don't think it's amazing. I think 3 enter to not vanish anything is problematic. I'd rather it be 2 enter to vanish 10,000 or more, or 3 enter to vanish anything. I think it's above a little bit of overcosted, but it is access to something green does not normally have. So I would try to probably be a bruiser deck with this. That means that I'm like shouldering my way to victory, either by being a stompy deck with red or a white deck that's like I'm just playing gigantic Signy that are also somewhat defensive. Moving along to Music of Vogue 3X. We have a black black Lrig, level 3. Its auto ability is during your turn, whenever another Lrig on your field grows, target Signy on your opponent's field gets negative 5,000 power till end of turn. It's also next auto ability is once a turn. During your opponent's turn, whenever another Lrig on your field grows, you can add target black Signy from your trash to your hand. Its action ability is once a game, you can return target assist Lrig on your field without attack phase timing, whose grow cost isn't 0 to your Lrig deck. Okay, so this is like the old Musica, except its bounce is a little bit more flexible and a little bit more conditional. Let's talk about the first 2 abilities. So basically it's saying, are you going to grow something on your opponent's turn, or are you going to grow something on your turn? And if you wanted to get the most out of this Lrig, you probably are playing some mix of attack phase timing and some mix of non-attack phase timing. So that way you can basically be like, on my turn 4 or on my turn 5, I've already used all my Lrig deck now and I'm good. You're also probably going to want to play one Lrig that has not attack phase timing, excuse me, that has main phase timing that you're probably not going to use. It's level 1 until your turn. Your turn 3. There are some decks that already do that. For example, Diagram, the original Diagram, sometimes doesn't use its Madoka float on turn 1 or 2. It uses it on turn 3 just because it's like, all right, this is the time I should actually restock. And there's ways to do that definitely in pretty much all decks. There's ways to pull that off in different colors. I'd lean towards that, and I'd lean towards one that I'm probably rushing to grow. And the reason is because I want to use its action once a game ability. Now, the action once a game ability is the strongest thing in the card. This is the reason you'd run this card, period, right? And it's got some issues. One, you can't repeat attack phase timing. If you could repeat attack phase timing, this card would be actually pretty highly in demand. Being able to repeat a Madoka Clap means that you can go to potentially turn 7, unlike every other deck in the format. You can't do that here, so that's not happening. It also needs to have your grow cost not be 0. Now, here's the issue. This is basically saying, if you want the most bang for your buck, you're going to want to use a level 2 assist Lrig whose grow cost isn't 0 and has main phase timing only. That list is incredibly small. You might see this and go, well, hold on, Andrew. You could. It doesn't say level 2, it says level 1. You could bring back a level 1 to your hand, to which I say, yeah, you totally could. Or you could repeat a level 1. That's great, like, cool. Madoka Float, draw yourself another 3 cards. Great, cool. But I'd argue with this. Oh, actually, you can't do Madoka Float because it's got level 0. There's not really any good level 1s that you're paying for. I would prioritize, me personally as a deck builder, the fact that I can use my assist Lrigs freely and flexibly more than I would want to abuse it with this once a game ability. Your cards should enhance your decks, not detract from them. If you're working on something that is like a combo where you need to do something opposite to what normally happens in a game of Wixoss, then your combo is probably bad. And this sort of pushes that in that direction. That's why I don't want to do that with a level 2, or levels 1. But there are a few level 2s that are good, that don't cost 1, or don't cost 0, and don't have attack phase timing. Those are things like, for example, the Ange level 2, right? That allows you to bounce something and trash something on the opponent's field. Doing that twice is ridiculously strong. And it's a little expensive because you have to pay 1 in order to do it. Plus you have to pay the 2, so it's going to cost you 5 in total. But if you were to be like, hey, would you play a card that says for 5 enter, you can bounce and trash twice on separate turns? I'd be like, hell yeah, I would. That's great. That's awesome, right? It's undercosted and it's doing a lot for that effect. So there are reasons to do it. Another ones that I can think of is X Step Out, which is actually my favorite because it pays for it. And there's also DJ Love It Mix is another one. And then there's also Senga, and it's worth mentioning this one for a specific reason. There's also Senga, who has, I think, I can't remember if it's Senga Parallel maybe is the name. It's got a grow cost of, I believe, 2, and then when you play it, you can enter charge 3, and you can also do a removal with it. So you can play this in team with just really taking the normal diagram deck that you would normally play, and then just shoving that that Senga into it, and it won't play any different. You'll just have a double removal, and it will be free at your disposal, which is cool. I'd rather go Dream Team with this personally. I don't think I'm spoiling anything here by saying that I'm going to be, when I'm doing my deck techs, showing one with X Step Out, and I think that's actually very cool. It really depends. So here's the thing: your Musica rating on where does it fall on your tier system depends on what Lrig you pair with it, right? Because that once a game ability basically just says repeat your level 2 Lrig twice. So depending on what you pair with it, if you pair it with something really good and something that's like, I'm breaking the game of Wixoss right now, then Musica is going to be better. And I think I'm going to rate it on highly viable, maybe very low optimal, because of that. Now, I recognize that I'm rating it higher than the whole Japanese meta right now, by the way. But I think there's a deck secretly in there with X Step Out that is very good and no one's really caught on to in Japan. So I think that's a good place to start if you're a Musica fan. And shout out to the person on Reddit who was like, hey, is there any way to break this? And I made me actually look past the Japanese meta and try to think about how to break it on my own. And I was like, oh yeah, there actually could be. We're going to be talking about Towel 3, Heralding 1. That's going to be a level 3 red Lrig, grow cost 2. It's got the auto ability that at the beginning of your attack phase, if there are 3 or more red Signy on your field, you can enter charge 1. And then you can also look at the top 6 cards of your deck, separate them into a 3-card pile up, face up pile, and a face down pile. So you look at the top 6 cards. You put 3 face up, 3 face down. Your opponent picks one of those piles, puts it in your trash, and then the other pile is added to your hand. So basically a Fact or Fiction-esque effect from Magic, if you guys know that reference. And Fact and Fiction's a pretty good card in Magic. It's sort of been power creeped out of Magic, but still is pretty good, right? So you can, when you're doing that last ability, you can either risk it for the biscuit, and you can put down a like really awesome 3 cards in your face up or 3 cards in your face down, either one, and then play mind games with your opponent, right? Like the onus is on your opponent, and there is actually nothing in Wixoss rules that states that you can't like make a joke about like, yeah, you know, those 3 that I put down are really strong, and just leave it to your opponent to freak out about, right? It is a mental game of rock, paper, scissors, which if you guys actually follow competitive rock, paper, scissors, there's like this whole psychological warfare that goes on prior to it to allow someone to manipulate the chances that someone picks in your favor. So this is a way that you could go about it if you want to. I'm not saying you should, and personally, I don't like doing that type of dirty system. I usually, when I play rock, paper, scissors, close my eyes and just do something so that way I'm unaffected by any outside influences and it's purely by chance. There's also a combo potential with this that is actually incredible, which is that if you have things that like to see certain things in your trash, you can separate it so that way it doesn't matter what pile they pick. They pick a pile, they put it to your hand, you have ways to go, hey, thank you for letting, I'm putting a face down pile that gives me lots of, like, gives me 2 really good things and 1 minor thing, right? And then I'm going to pick a pile here that's face up, and it's 2 things that bring things back from the trash, and 1 minor thing that's for me, right? And the opponent's damned if they do, damned if they don't. This isn't a Punisher effect like we were talking about earlier with Miko Miko. This is actually a thing you have control of. So when you play this deck, you could use this ability to give yourself an advantage no matter what. And that's what you're going to want to lean into when you play this. However, it fights a little bit against the auto ability. The auto ability is during your attack phase, if there are 3 or more red Signy on your field, you can enter charge 1, which leads you to want to play this in a mono red deck. And you could just ignore that ability, right? And just specifically only use it for its action once a game ability if you'd like. And I think you'd be fine doing that too. But if you want to play it so that you're playing out the full potential of this Lrig, then that would mean that you're going to be wanting to play a mostly mono red deck. At that point, you have 2 options in front of you. You can either pair this with Ancient Surprise, who has okay assists, but an incredible team piece that allows you to just basically have on-demand removal when you're playing red. Then you could run that, right? And then you have a ton of removal. You have reliable once a turn removal plus anything else that you want to do. The deck basically is if you like Lancelot, it's Lancelot the deck. And that's a great thing to be in if you're in mono red. Or you can break mono red and you can play assist Lrigs that will give you effects that you wouldn't otherwise have. And you can play some multicolored stuff in it too if you need to balance some things out. And then you can just use that second ability as just mostly gas. The option's up to you. I think I lean more towards the mono red deck because there's nothing that I can put in my trash right now and then put some stuff in my hand and be like, I've assembled the combo. You now lose the game. The minute there is something that is a trash-based combo, you can start seeing Towel becoming much, much, much better. So Towel gets put into the viable camp, and the fact that 15 Folklores 15 Lancelots are good regardless of the deck that you play it in. So I think probably I'd play it in that thing. It could actually go up to optimal if there's ever a really, really good trash-based combo deck, which just flat out does not exist, and Wixoss is not super kind to combo decks in general. So I don't think you're going to be seeing it anytime soon. All right, our last one here is going to be Umir Trey, Key to Uproar. It's a blue Lrig with the grow cost of 2. It has the auto ability at the beginning of your attack phase. You may swap the positions of 2 target signi on your field. At the beginning of your opponent's, look at its enter ability. Look at your opponent's hand, choose a card, put that card in the bottom of its owner's deck. Basically the same thing that Miko Miko does, just putting it out there. And then your action once a game ability is you can put 1 Heliusk on your opponent's signi fields. Now, before we go on, we probably should talk about what a Heliusk is. You can place this on a Lrig, or you can place this on any of the 3 signi fields, right? And they have to put the signies on top of it. That does not necessarily mean that anything that triggers and says, if this has a card underneath it, no, it doesn't count for this. This is just an effect that affects that signi zone for the rest of the game. And the Heliusk, you can use this, I think there will be a token for this. You can use this. It says at the beginning of your attack phase, banish target signi in the signi zone unless your opponent discards a card or pays colorless. This auto ability activates during the attack phase of the player who placed it. So it's during your attack phase, which is better than actually the opposite. Because it's going to stress your opponent's enter sources, which is going to cause them to not be able to play their signies or signies effects or their Lrig defense step stuff easily, and it also means that you are opening lanes that you can then attack through. All of these things, pretty good. You also have that enter ability where you just snatch a card out of their hand, right? And it, again, does not say non-guard, so you can snatch a guard out of their hand. You have this auto ability that is, at the beginning of your attack phase, you can swap positions of 2 target signies on your field. Okay, so right now let's talk about some signi swapping stuff. You can do signi swap in Tribal. It won't be very good. It's been tried. Tiffany has tried to make that work to the ends of the world. It hasn't worked out well. There is one card, however, that is very, very, very good on it. It's the level 1 that when it swaps positions on your field, it makes the opponent discard a card at random for free. And this triggers that immediately. Woohoo! You can then just get your, you can just make your opponent discard a card. So it's build your own, it's build your own, oh god, what's the card? Fenrir. And Fenrir is a great card. So, you know, do it. It's actually better than Fenrir because it makes your opponent discard a card at random. I would run 4 of these in the deck, just because I would, right? Baseline, that auto ability makes it worth running that one. Whether or not you want to run High Circus in your deck too, just so that way you can see a little bit of what your opponent's going to be drawing against you, as well as being able to re-trigger that that effect on your level 1, is up to you. You could. I think that's where it ends, though. I wouldn't be playing any of the other signi swapping games, at least your own signi swapping. Green, it's kind of sad. Green has the signi swapping your opponent's field, and this has signi swapping your field kind of thing. There are some white cards that swap lanes on their own. And I wouldn't necessarily be playing it just to play that here, because I still don't think it's really good on its own. So yeah, I wouldn't run signi swapping tribal, but you can use a signi swapping effect that's very, very good in this deck and make your deck better. The Heliolisk is an interesting thing, right? It's the most powerful thing. You're going to snap that off turn 3 no matter what, right? It pushes a couple questions on you. You can discard the opponent's hand and force them to use Enter to keep their signi around, which is good because that's Enter burn that you can't be punished for. Great. Or you could run red stuffs in it, and then you could Enter burn your opponent and force them to discard cards in your hand. Or you can do both. You can run a red and blue deck that Enter burns your opponent and also discards cards in their hand to force them to basically start running out of resources. Either way, I think you want to run this in an aggressive deck. We're talking tempo here, not aggro. And you'll probably be better off for it by playing it a red-green aggressive-based deck where you're running the normal... Sorry, red-blue, where you're running the normal red-blue tempo-based stuff. You might throw a little Enter burn in there, but I think it's a lot of things to handle, trying to do lane opening, enter burning, and also discarding. So you might want to focus on one more than the other, probably the discarding because it's naturally in blue. Um, and you'll probably be best off if you do that kind of thing. You're also running Ancient Surprise, right? Like it is Ancient Surprise. You don't need to run Ancient Surprise in this. In fact, I should point out that there are Japanese-based decks that run black and white in order to use this as more of a control-based card that have actually seen some recent wins. I don't. It's not popular and it's not like meta defining at all. So take it more as a surprise deck that did well. But I think it's very underutilized. The blue red Umir idea, and it did just recently win a ceremony, a 7th in the ceremony, where you just play Worlds Reverse, and you then are less reliant on having to do removal. You can do a couple removal per game with it, and you just sort of like draining their resources. I think it's a pretty good deck that you can make with this. I'm gonna put this down as optimal, tentatively speaking, which I'm sure will make Tiffany very, very, very excited when she inevitably gives you the deck tech based on this. So that's it, guys. Tell me how you feel about Curiosity Diva. What's your favorite cards that you're ready to run? What are you excited for? And what do you think is going to be good? It's weird. This one, I have a lot of excitement for all of the Lrigs that are being introduced here. I don't think any of them are particularly super powerful, but all of them have like, well, if the game goes in a certain direction, this could be revised to become really, really good again, right? Like, Umir, if they eventually be like, yep, we're set 12 and we're doing lane swapping as a thing, Umir is going to become incredible. Same thing with, like, for example, Toko. They just recently announced that they're going to be printing new virtuals. Suddenly, Toko could be a viable deck in a year from now. So I think these are a lot of ones to watch, personally.